Here's the question. What's going on inside the minds of top achievers that cause them to make extraordinary breakthroughs both personally and professionally? My name is Tim Shurr, and I invite you to join me as we take a deep dive into the unconscious mind and discover how to transform your biggest dreams into a reality. Welcome to the How to Be Mesmerizing podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and today we have an exciting mesmerizing guest with us. Chris Naugle is with us. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to be with you as well. Thanks so much for making time. So Chris has a fascinating background, a pro snowboarder, which we're going to talk about what it's like to be a pro snowboarder, right? And then also kind of America's #1 money mentor as well. You know, ended up working on Wall Street and financial planning, and then becoming a real estate mogul and getting a pilot on HGTV. So you've had quite the career, going from racing down mountains and flying around in the air on a board, you know, to managing money and teaching people a lot of the myths of money and stuff like that. So let's talk about the snowboarding first. Okay. Everybody's
awesome.
like,
it's my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah. People are like, no, tell me about how to make more money, but let's talk about snowboarding first, right? Because a big part of making money is finding your passion. So how did you get into snowboarding?
Yeah. So just as a young kid, I grew up in a lower middle-class family. I didn't have the ability to go out and do a lot of things. So I spent a lot of time at the house in the backyard, and right up the street from me, there was this hill, and I used to ride my four-wheeler there. It was kind of a dirt bike track, and I was always skateboarding, and my one friend came over one day and he had this snowboard. And I'm like, wow, that's cool, like skating on the snow. And then I started diving into it, and I ended up for Christmas asking for a snowboard. And my mom bought me a used beat up snowboard. And that winter, I remember I didn't have money, and my family didn't have money to go to the hills and travel to the resorts. So I'd walk my butt up the street or ride the four-wheeler up there, and we'd build jumps on this little hill. And that's kind of how I started. And I'll never forget, like, I got the opportunity one day to go to the resort. And I got there, I'm like, what is this? Like, it was just this giant lit up thing. And I remember I went to the top thinking, oh, I've got this. Now, up to this point, all I'd done is go to the top of a hill, point the board straight, hit the jump, do a trick, and hike back up. That's all I'd done. And now I had to turn this dumb thing. And I'll never forget how hard it was. It was like impossible, but I ended up getting the hang of it, and I ended up loving it and got really, really good at it. But I got good, not because I was going to the resort. I ended up finding out that there was a country club by my house, and my mom used to drop me off after school with my snowboard, and it was in a ravine. So what I would do is, out of the sand trap, you know, I'd watch the videos at home of all the pro snowboarders, and I'd see the tricks, and I'd get them so ingrained in my head. All day in school, I'm drawing pictures of these tricks getting done, so that when I got to the country club, it was Lockport Country Club, I would build a jump as fast as I could out of the sand trap. And then I would hike back up, and I'd practice the same couple tricks that I had envisioned all day or all week. And then it would get dark. Mom would pick me up. And I remember I used to get really tired hiking the hill. So I literally got so infatuated with, I got to get in better shape. So I used to, you know, when I wasn't snowboarding, I'd run in my backyard with big, heavy winter boots on just to get in shape so that I could hike the hill faster. And that's, you know, that's how I did. I did what everybody else was unwilling to do. And that's what got me good enough to start competing and start winning. And, you know, it just goes from there.
That's amazing. So many great insights already, right? About when we first start, it feels impossible, but when you stay with it, the impossible becomes possible. And then, you know, watching what others are doing and what's helping others to win. And then you started doing that and just making these mental blueprints in your mind, and then just practice and getting yourself in shape and looking for any chance to improve yourself. So if there was an obstacle, there was something getting in your way, you kept using it to your advantage. And I have this clear image of you as a kid running up hills in snow boots. I love that. I think that's great.
And it's funny, you know, you'll see a pattern, you know, throughout my life of exactly, you know, that whole thing that you just mentioned, because I didn't have things. I didn't let the lack of something. Actually, I didn't even know I was lacking anything. You know, I grew up in you know, my mom raising me, and, you know, the biggest thing she always did is when I wanted something, she would teach me to dream about that. Now, I don't mean like, you know, that fictitious dreaming, and like literally, like if I wanted a skateboard or a BMX, you know, I would go and get BMX Plus, or I'd buy a skateboard skateboarding magazine, and I like to draw. So I would always draw it out. And then all day in school, I would just fixate on that thing. You know, I'd try to learn a little bit, but then I'd always be drawing on paper, all these things, so that when I did get to the hill, or when I did get the skateboard, or I did get the BMX, it was kind of almost like I'd already been doing it. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to, you know, kind of visualize, especially in today's world with cell phones. All right. We're always living vicariously through videos of somebody else. Well, I did the same thing. I watched VHS tapes, or I look through magazines were a big thing back then. And I would get myself so ingrained in what these videos and what these pictures were, that literally it was almost to the point where, it's a universal law. It's like gravity. When you dream something and believe in it so intently, it has to happen. Well, I am proof. Every one of those things throughout my life has happened, but it always started with a deep intention and a deep desire to do it. I mean, I could talk about surfing with that. I could talk about the businesses I've started. Heck, I could talk about a BMX track that I built in my backyard because I saw a picture in BMX Plus of somebody's backyard. And I got so intently obsessed with this little BMX track that I remember I saved $100 and I got my mom to allow me to have a dump truck full of clay dumped in her driveway. And I spent half of the summer with a wheelbarrow and a shovel, bringing dirt from the driveway back to the backyard. And I built an insane BMX track that mimicked the one I saw in that picture. I mean, that's just like, if you think about that, that's every single thing in my life, but that's everything that people need to realize. Like, when you want something, it's not about your actual resources. It's about how resourceful you can actually be. If you don't have the money, don't let that stop you. Don't say, oh, I don't have the money. Someday I wish I could, I should have. No, keep dreaming about it. And it sounds so weird, but it is a law. It will happen.
Yeah. If you keep dreaming about it, then your mind will give you ideas for, well, why don't you take this action and then this action and then this action? And so when you're dreaming about something, your mind starts trying to figure out how to make it happen. So it gives you clues and gives you insights, gives you these ideas, and then you act on those ideas. Every time you tell a story, Chris, about how you were dreaming about it and drawing it out and thinking about it, the very next thing out of your mouth is, and then here's what I did. And then here's the action that I took, right? So that it's the combination of dreaming about it, obsessing about what you desire. And then when your brain starts giving you ideas for how to make it happen, you have to act on those ideas. And people either aren't dreaming because they're telling themselves, I can't do it, or it's impossible, I don't have the resources, or they're saying, yeah, it's possible, and I dream about it all the time, I draw it out, but nothing ever happens. Well, it's because you're probably not taking the consistent action. You had a shovel and a wheelbarrow every day. You weren't just dreaming, you were digging. You were making the tracks, right? You were making the little jumps. I mean, you were actually making the stuff happen. And so you have to do both, which is brilliant. And so then you start to become, really good at this because you love it and you keep practicing, and then suddenly you become pro. So what happens when you become pro, when you start racing against these other people who are really great too?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. And, I started getting really good. And, there was a program through school that got me to the resort every weekend. And I was still doing this country club thing. Literally, I have photos of when I was pro going to the country club, building the same jumps I did when I was a kid out of the same sand traps and learning really advanced tricks. And then in the summertime, I didn't have the money to travel before I went pro. So I got a trampoline and I started practicing on the trampoline. So there's so much up to that, from just learning to becoming amateur to pro. And the pro was unique. I remember hearing that this weekend there was going to be two pros, Blair and Shane. They were Burton riders. They were going to be at my local resort. So I made all the, preparations to be at the resort. And I got there really early and I was practicing so that when they got there, maybe I'd catch their eye. And I didn't know anything about being a pro. I didn't know there was a process, team managers. I'm just like, if I get them to see me and like what I do, maybe I'll have a shot. And I remember they were riding and there was video crews and I was really nervous because, I didn't want to just do. So I spent more time just watching them. But then I remember after they were done riding and they were kind of off, the crews were still there. So I started hitting the same jumps and I had been really practicing these two tricks and I had them down and they were not the best tricks. They weren't pro level tricks, but they were good. Like they caught the attention. I remember the team manager saw me doing this and I had no idea who this guy was. And when he approached me, I thought he was just some guy watching Blair and Shane. insane. I literally almost kind of thought I was going to brush him off because I was so intent. I got to get in front of the camera guys. I got to get in front of the camera guys. Where did Blair and Shane go? But this is the guy that I need to talk to. And what he did is he invited me to a contest that was going on where he was going to be. And I thought I committed to it, but I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get there. Like, and I had to find somebody that I knew that had a car that could get me there. And we went, and I ended up winning the contest. And that's when I went from like the nothing to the amateur level. And then, you know, after a year being amateur, I went pro with that same company. And that team manager stayed with me for the whole beginning part of my pro career. And I eventually ended up jumping ship for more money to another sponsor. But I mean, that's how it happened. It was, I would say some of it's luck, but really, I don't know how much luck there was involved. I just put myself in that position at that time. Where I screwed up is I should have done some research and learned the process. But I mean, back then we didn't have Google, we didn't have cell phones. Like it was just read the magazines, watch the videos, and go out there and get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I got chills. That was an awesome story. So again, you know, you're right. It wasn't luck. I mean, that was just so brilliant. You know, it's amazing that kind of entrepreneurial spirit that you have, Chris, that you were thinking, all right, I'm just going to get out there and I'm going to get out there early and I'm going to practice really hard and I'm going to get in front of the right people. I'm going to take that shot. There's so many people who said that'll never work. They won't care anyway. No one's going to pay attention to me. But you weren't letting that get in the way, right? I'm going to go do it anyway. And then, you know, it's the person that we don't think that's going to connect with us or something. And we end up connecting with them the most. Right. And so when that manager saw you and invited you to that contest, you know, preparation plus opportunity equals success. So you were preparing and then it happened. That's awesome.
So crazy to think about it. Cause I mean, I do hundreds of podcasts and I don't think I've ever gone into that story and not on one of them because it's never been dragged out of me, you know, but you're right. You're absolutely correct. Like back then I was just a kid. Like you got to remember, like, I'm just a kid. Like I didn't have a car. I didn't have any money. I'm on beat up equipment. You know, everybody else is on this nice equipment, but I had the dream and the desire, and I was willing to do what everybody else was unwilling to do. And I hadn't even been at that point in my life yet where I had people telling me things couldn't happen or things wouldn't be possible. That came very shortly thereafter, which we'll certainly get into. But up to that point, I really didn't have any naysayers or people in my life saying, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, because I was so young. You know, when we're kids, like I now have a 13-month-old, like there is no barriers. There is no restrictions when you're a kid. You can dream and everything in your life is possible until somebody else tries to get you to conform to their idea that it's not. And that is the biggest problem in this country and in this world is conformity, because people, you know, they grow up in this limited mindset or they've been beat down enough times where they think that things aren't possible just because they weren't able to do it, just because they've never tried. And then they go on and they tell people that they can't do it. There's no way you can be a pro snowboarder coming out of Buffalo, New York. You don't have hills. There's no big contest here. Right. If you believe you can't, you won't. I just didn't believe I couldn't do it. I didn't believe that there was any restrictions. And, you know, that's how I was able to do what everybody else was not willing or able to ever do. There's so few pro snowboarders to ever come out of Buffalo. I think there's been 4 total to ever come out of this area. Now that's bad statistics, but you know what? Those couple that did it, they obviously knew something or did something that defied what everybody else wasn't doing. And I think that's success wrapped up. I think success can be boiled down in 2 things. What makes somebody successful and somebody not successful? Why is it that, you know, out of 120-year-olds, if you ask them if they're going to be multimillionaires by the time they're 65, 100% of them will say absolutely. But by 65, according to Social Security, only 5 of those 100 eager, optimistic 20-year-olds will actually be financially successful. What the heck happened to the other 95%? Like, I'll tell you, they conformed. They conformed to somebody telling them they couldn't do something, somebody telling them that they should do something different, somebody telling them to abandon their dreams. So what about the 5? They created their destiny. They created their future and failed to ever let anyone tell them they could not do it. That is the only difference between success and failure. And nobody can tell me that that isn't the one thing that differentiates the 2.
Yeah, I agree. Our minds are full of limiting beliefs that keep us from believing in ourselves or taking action on those clues that will take you to your desired destination. And if we're not upgrading those beliefs and letting go of that stuff, that the fears of others, that we've absorbed and made our own fears, if we're not letting that go and we're not working through that, then you're right. People don't take the action and miss out on a lot of treasure that they could have had that was waiting for them. But they had too many beliefs that made them look the other way or doubt themselves. So,
yeah. 4-letter swear word, fear. God, it's been part of my life in every step of the way. It's part of everybody's.
It's part of everybody's, and that's why we go back to that old acronym of, false evidence appearing real. That's what fear is, right? And I've learned to turn it into feeling excited and ready, because I know that wherever I get afraid, that's where my biggest breakthrough's hiding, so if I'm afraid and I'm resisting and my mind says I can't, now I think I must. Right. So, but this is a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about the New Hampshire experience where you were talking about you were snowboarding there and you had some fear and you had to figure out how to deal with it. So share that story with everybody.
Yeah. So it was early on in my pro career and I was invited to a really big contest, big photographers, everything. And I was nervous being there, but I was always the rider that got up before all the other riders. And I remember it was a gloomy day. It was in New Hampshire, which I feel like every day was gloomy there when we went there, but I'm on the lift first, like I got on first lift and I'm going up, it's foggy, and halfway up, it kind of levels off and we come out of the fog and I look over to my left, and over to my left, there's like a bunch of banners, but there's this ginormous jump. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, that can't be the jump we're hitting. But I knew it was, because all the photographers, all the, park crew are setting it all up. And I'm like, instantly, I went from this eager, young pro snowboarder to fear, to literally going the rest of that lift ride thinking there's no way I can hit that. Like, they can't be the jump, fear engulfed me. And I remember I got to the top of the hill. I go over to the thing. I'm just pacing around at the top of the run in, looking down at this thing, going, this is crazy. It's got to be a 70-foot jump. And back then 70 foot was a ginormous jump. Today it's kind of the norm, but all the other riders start getting there. And, back then we wore headphones and everybody's just kind of walking around head down and, you look up, hey, what's up? But you knew everybody's thinking the same thing. And as snowboarders, there was always kind of a hidden rule where there always had to be a guinea pig, and a guinea pig was the starter. That's what you would know it as, the first person that's got to hit the jump. So how we always figured it out in the pro arena back then, it was just a small group of riders, usually at these invite only events. And, we would do Rochambeau. And for some reason I lost this time. And I was the guinea pig. And I remember I'm sitting there looking down at this jump. The event's just about to start. I got to hit it first just to make sure that it's safe, or that, just to kind of get the starter ready, whatever they did it for. I think it was just basically to kind of get everybody's fears gone. And you're sitting there and you're looking down at this jump and you're thinking to yourself, if I go too fast, I'm going to overshoot the landing and I'm going to land flat. That could result in blown out knees. That can be paralyzation and death. But if I go too slow because I'm scared to go too fast, I could come up short. I could knuckle the deck and bounce. And that definitely is going to blow your knee out, roll your ankle, and you're going to be out of the contest. End of story. And you're just sitting there and you're just thinking about all these things. And then the starter comes over, the announcer, and he says, okay, Chris, are you ready? They're ready for you. Now, at this point, you've got a decision to make. You can say, oh, I'm not ready. And you can bail out. And that's probably that would be a career ender, I think, if somebody ever did that, because you'd never overcome that. You'd never forgive yourself. Or the second option is you leap. And I remember him saying it vividly. This is one of my most memorable contests. He said it, and without even thinking, I leaped. And there's a moment of silence. It's just picking up speed. And the next thing, you're off, you're in the air. And at that very moment, the second you left the jump, you see, everything changed, because at that very moment, instinct kicks in. All the practice, all the times you've done this kicks in. You do your trick, you ride off. But at that moment, once you ride off, you've landed the trick, or maybe you bounced off your butt, you're done. Everything at that very moment is completely different. You see, at that very moment, you have overcome fear, and every single thing is possible. Now, at that moment, another thing happens. You can't wait to get back up to the top to now do every single trick in your lineup list, every one, because you overcame the fear and you leaped. That one contest, that one event in a pro snowboarding is exactly why I've had tremendous success in the business world. I've always been the one to leap. And I've failed a lot. But every single time I failed, equivalent to every time I've broken a bone or torn a ligament or many of the crazy injuries I've had in snowboarding, every one of them was just a learning lesson to get me to the next level, not a quitting point. The only way to actually fail in anything is to quit. It's a mindset game. Because if I got wrecked, and I got wrecked so many times, the final one took me out of my pro career in the right around 2008. But we're always mentally challenging ourselves, and that's the only thing that will stop. And it's not until you actually say, I quit, that you actually fail. So I wanted to bring that up because that is the most pivotal memory I had in snowboarding. And that was just one event.
Oh my God. The hair on my arms are just standing straight up. That was, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Amazing. So one of those times before 2008, when you kind of got wrecked, right? And what did you do in your mind to be able to get up, or heal and then go out there and do it again?
Well, a lot of times you didn't get up, you got carried down on the stretcher. So
oh my God.
As a pro snowboarder, I will tell you one thing is a kind of a common bond. We all know we're going to get hurt, and it's just, is your injury going to take you out longer than 6 months? In our contracts with our sponsors, we had 6 months for an injury to get better, to get rehabbed and get back on the snow. So whether it was when I broke my hip sliding handrails, or, I blew out my MCL and PCL, or my ACL on my other knee, to wreck my ankles. I could just go on, broken ribs, all those things. I could go on and on. Every one of those, when it happened, it was kind of like, yes, it hurts. Yes, it sucks. But, we laughed about it. We're at the hospital and we're laughing about it. Hey, doc, how quick can we get this thing fixed? In PT, how fast can we make this? You got any good people that know how to tape? Or, I tried everything. It was always just a race to get back on the hill. It was never boo-hoo me, or I can't believe I got hurt. It was just like, all right, we get this out of the way. Now I'm going to be stronger when I go back, because I'm going to be forced to do PT, and my body's going to be in a better shape. Now, that wasn't always the case, but that's how our minds worked. And it wasn't just me. Every athlete I competed with, all of us had that same thing. And I remember many years, many contests, riding with completely taped up ankles, knee braces, wrists that were still broken, taped up so that they didn't move. And, we didn't even think about it. Sure, it hurt. If you fell on it, boy, you got to wake really quick. But that was just part of the game. Now, I don't care if it's NFL or any other pro sports. I guarantee you the mindset's the same in all of them, because otherwise they wouldn't be pro athletes. They just wouldn't be.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. I love the mindset. So it's not about getting hurt. It's about healing up so you can get back out there and do it again, because that's what you love, right? I can't imagine the high that you get from flying through the air and hitting those jumps. And what a rush. It makes you feel fully alive to be out there doing that.
I still get it today.
Yeah. So, all right. So how do we go from being a snowboarder and doing exceptionally well with that over to managing money?
So we left out a big thing during that journey of the pro snowboarding. I also had realized at the age of 16, now I had been working on farms from 14 on, but at the age of 16, I got a big boy job at a restaurant. They degraded me so badly that I remember I came in one day and I quit. And in my mind, that day was the day I acted, and I didn't know it then, but I quit trading hours for dollars. And I came home and I said to my mom, I said, Mom, can I open a clothing line in the basement so that I can, make a little money by selling shirts and hats out of my backpack at school? The only money I needed back then was the money to get to the hill, or the money for a new snowboard. And, once I was amateur, I was getting all that stuff free. But I started a clothing line called Fat Clothing Company, PHAT, and I printed my first dozen shirts with my art teacher. So that business fueled my snowboarding, desires during, for 16 to 17. Now at 17, I had my stores in a whole bunch of stores across the Eastern Seaboard. I had, I think, 3 seamstresses working full time. I was doing okay, not making a lot of money, but doing okay and growing. And then I got my next big idea. I wanted my own store. I had seen all these shop owners that I was selling to living the life that I wanted. These guys were shop owners, and then they were just snowboarding. So they were living the lifestyle I wanted. So I said, I need a store. And I got an opportunity to open a shop called Fat Man Board Shops. Okay. We just took fat clothing and made it Fat Man, because I was the guy, I guess. And at 17, all I needed to open this 1,000 square foot store in the Lockport Mall was $70,000. That's what I had boiled it down to that it would cost to open it. And I didn't have 70 grand. I had a 1986 Buick. I had a baseball card collection, a KX 125, and maybe some BMXs and stuff like that. So when I went around to the banks, I learned that they needed a business plan. So I went to the Small Business Development Center, wrote the business plan, and I got turned down by everybody. Remember I was saying earlier, I hadn't yet at that point in my life started having people tell me I couldn't do things. This was like that first big moment where people started literally telling me I was crazy. You shouldn't do this. This is a big mistake. You're going to lose somebody's money. My father told me to go get a job at the factory where he was working and abandon it. And he did it in a way that wasn't good. I mailed him cats in the cradle and we didn't talk for 2 years. But I ended up getting to the point where I was going to abandon this dream. Now, my mother, who had raised me, and my mom never had anything. She barely kept a roof over her house. We grew up in a 700 square foot, 2-bedroom ranch, but my mom got that house in the divorce. She saw my dream almost about to die. And she made, I think, which was a very stupid decision, but you know, if I wouldn't be where I'm at, she put her house on the line. She had about $80,000 in equity and she put that house on the line so her punk snowboard kid could chase his dream. Fat Man Board Shop opened in November of 1994. So I wanted to get that out of the way. So now I'm on my way to being a pro snowboarder. I think at that point I was a pro snowboarder. Now I've got my retail stores. So now I am truly living the perfect life. And, like I will say, like this period of time in my life was surreal. And I was doing all just amazing things. The business was growing. I was opening new locations all the way to the early 2000s. Now, if you remember, some of your listeners might remember the .com crash. That recession hit. And I remember I had just got back from California before the planes hit the towers. And I remember thinking to myself, what is a recession? I didn't even know what the word really meant, but I did know that my business started declining rapidly. Sales started dropping. People stopped coming in. Everything started changing. And I got to the point where I was highly leveraged. I had to get a job. My friend worked at Little Caesars and I'm like, all right, I'll go work at Little Caesars and deliver pizzas. But I put my resume out and the only people calling me back, and I remember getting frustrated about this, were financial advisory firms, were Wall Street firms. Those are the only people that reached out to me. And I did interviews. And finally, I ended up taking a job because a guy took keys for his Porsche and slid them across the table. And I was like, wow, I want that. And then I'd watched Michael Douglas's Wall Street. So that's how I went from pro snowboarder, skateboard shop owner, to financial advisor. Now, this was supposed to be a temporary thing. Bear in mind, my mindset was, I'm a pro snowboarder. I'm not a financial advisor. I got to wear a suit. I didn't even have a suit. Didn't know how to tie a tie. My grandma took me and got me my first suit so that I could go to my job. And I ended up loving it. Not only did I love it, I was really good at it. I was really good at helping people. And that was 2003. That first started, all the way up to 2008, I became one of the top financial advisors. And now in that process, my mind had changed. I stopped working in my stores and I started working on my stores, and I started working in Wall Street and doing the financial advisory thing, but I was crushing it. I had flipped a couple houses, one in 06, one in 08, or I'm sorry, one in 07. And then in 2008, right before the big one, I had bought a dilapidated paint store, which I was going to convert to a 3-unit strip mall and move my retail store into it because my lease came due right before the Great Recession hit. And that Great Recession, man, that for any of you that lived that, it was bad. My retail stores dropped 30% overnight. My financial advisory business flatlined, like just went to zero. And here I am, 370 grand in debt to this hard money lender at, he probably charged me 17 or 14%. I don't remember what it was. And I got so to the point where I had one payment left to pay him. Never forget this. I had just enough money in the account to pay him for one more month. And after that, it was no man's land, probably bankruptcy. And I came home, never had to really ask anybody for help except for my mom putting her house up. I came home to my girlfriend who just moved in and I said, sweetie, I need your help. This is really hard for me because, I'm this guy that came from nothing and now I'm making all this money and now I lost it all. Mm-hmm. And I said, sweetie, I need you to help me pay the mortgage. I need you to help me pay the utilities. My friend Pete's going to move into that bedroom down the hall and I'm trying to rent that upstairs bedroom to Jessica. Like I put it all on the line. 50% or more of women would have just walked out the door and never came back. But I think she kind of liked me. And that's how I made it through the Great Recession. And that was my first learning lesson, because believe me, when you get down in the dumps like that, you do want to quit. You look around and you say, I just want to quit. I don't know how I'm going to make it through this. I don't like owing all these people money. And like, that was a hard learning lesson for me, but that brought me to that next phase after I had kind of climbed out of that.
Yeah. Wow. I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and people that have this kind of similar mindset that you and I have. And it really is that desire to figure out how do we make it work. It's not whether we're going to or not. We have to, right? So how are we going to do it? And we put all our focus on how are we going to get to the next step? How are we going to get to the next day? How are we going to get to the next chapter, right? It's never about, is this going to work? And then, giving up and quitting, that's never really the option. It's always like, we can't die. We have to survive. It's a must. And it's so interesting as I'm listening to your story, Chris. My parents divorced. I also sent my dad that Cats in the Cradle song. So we have some very interesting similarities here. A brother from another mother. So,
oh man, it's hard to listen to that song.
It's to this day. Yeah. And so, and also, I've had my private practice for 26 years. So every single one of those events that you're talking about, I was there too. I'm like, yep, I went through that. Yep. I went from king of the world to how am I going to get my bills paid this month? And most of the people that I know that are successful have had those wild highs and lows, and, but keep figuring out, we just keep figuring out how to even it out and how to make sure that when you're high, when you're up, that you're tucking away that money, like squirrels saving those acorns, you're tucking away those acorns because another rainy day's coming. No matter how good it is, no matter how sunny it is, it's gonna rain. Or for you, even when it's snowing, there's gonna be times when it doesn't. So we got to pack it away. And so, all right. So that's fascinating. Okay. So you went and you started to become very successful with the financial planning, which isn't a surprise because you have such a drive and a desire to excel that it wouldn't matter really what you did with. No matter where someone put you, you are going to find a way to succeed. That's just who you are.
Can I just take 2 seconds to talk about that? A lot of people ask me, like, how were you able to have so much success as an advisor? I kind of, it's the easiest thing in the world. When I got into these firms, all the guys would get there promptly at like 9 or 9:30 in the morning. They'd start rolling in. And I witnessed this very early on. They'd all leave for an extended lunch break and they were all gone by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm sitting in the bullpen in the cubicles, just looking around being like, okay, so if I want to get that office in the corner, all I need to do is get here at 7:30 in the morning, skip lunch and eat lunch here and work till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And that's what I did. Literally, there was no secret behind it. I wasn't the best financial advisor. I didn't know more than these other guys. I simply out freaking worked them by doing what they were unwilling to do. Granted, listen, I would have loved to have left for a nice lunch. I just didn't have the means to go to lunch. I brought lunch, which was usually a Tupperware full of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and maybe some mulberries from the tree outside where I lived. I just outworked them. And once you build a habit, right? I'm a young 20 years old at this point, broke when I first got into this. And I just got in the habit of doing this. I'd get there early and I loved it because I got all my planning done. I knew all my appointments. By the time the market opened, by the time people I started calling, man, I already knew what my day looked like. Lunch, it was an optional for me. And then all I did in the evenings is I would go out and see people. It was great to talk to them on the phone, which in the beginning they wanted us pounding the phones, but I was better face to face. So I went out and I sat at kitchen tables when people got out of work. And that's how I did it. Literally, no difference, between me and them, except for I just did more. I worked harder.
You were up the hill first.
That's it.
You were the first one up the hill, right?
That's right.
And then the last one to come off that hill. And that's what gave you the advantage. Sometimes people are like, oh, I'm not smart, or I don't have the resources, or I don't have the connections. Yeah, but we all have the same amount of time, right? And how you're using your time. That's right. So you and I will be at it first thing in the morning and last one off the hill, and other people will be taking hour-long breaks and having cocktails, and going out and having a beer for lunch. I'm like, what? I got another 10 hours. I can,
Absolutely right.
and I can eat lunch on my desk, while I'm cranking through. So it's just it's a different mindset. Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly right. And that's always what helped me through. You might be smarter, more talented, or have this or that, but you won't outwork me. because I'll just keep going and going. And then it's a point where it's not just where you're putting in 1,000,000 hours. The very first millionaire I ever got to ask advice from, I was a young guy, and he was the only millionaire I knew. And I said, how do you become wealthy? And he says, well, if I work for an hour and I earn $1, and then I work for 2 hours, I earn $2. I doubled my money. And that was basically his advice, that just work, 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 and then you'll make more money. But over time, I realized that you can't just put in 1,000,000 hours, especially as you get older, right? And so you've got to learn how to work smarter. So how did you start to make that transition so that you weren't finding yourself kind of working dollars for hours again?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that a millionaire told you that you just got to work harder, because you're right. Like that always keeps you trapped. There is only so many hours we can work. I don't care how much you're willing to hustle. There's still only X amount of hours. And it doesn't matter how much you make per hour. You're always restricted by hours for dollars. The wealthiest people that I've met, the one thing that they did different, and I'll get to this story in a second, how I started learning this, is they didn't focus on working longer. They focused on making their money, this tool that they had, work harder. And, from after the crash, the Great Recession, from that whole next period, I also had several clients that were multimillionaires. And the one thing that was unanimous among all of them, they were in real estate. And all these guys, after the Great Recession, they were buying. So I just started getting good at mimicking people. I mimicked the best advisors in the office. What did they do? How did they conduct their appointments? And I was just mimicking. I wasn't a smart kid. Like, I didn't come from an Ivy League school or have all these big accreditations, but what I did is I just found the smartest guys and I copied them. I just mimicked what they did, their patterns, their habits. These millionaires all had real estate. So from 2009 to 14, unbeknownst to me, good time to be buying, I did what Warren Buffett said. I bought low and I just kept buying. I didn't have a whole lot of money at this point, but the bank, that took me out of that hard money lender, luckily, that same bank was lending on all these deals. And I got up to 36 units by 14. I was, I guess you would say I was doing well. I had lots of assets, didn't have a lot of cash flow, because every penny I made, I plowed back into this real estate thing that I was doing. But then in 14, I brought my 37th deal to that same bank, and they said no. They said, Mr. Naugle, you don't fit in the little square box anymore. It's debt to income ratio. And I said, well, what do you mean? All these properties are cash flowing. I'm making good, decent money as an advisor. Like, at this point, I had sold off my stores and sold off that strip mall, but like all this stuff is going well. Why am I being denied? And they said, well, debt to income ratio works this way. And they taught me what debt to income was, and I didn't fit their box. So they froze me from new mortgages. Then they froze one of my lines of credit. I got a little behind and they froze the line of credit. I'm like, what? You literally just cut my arms off from renovating the rest of these properties. So I had to sell all 36 units. I had bought my dream house with the same girlfriend I was talking about, who is now my fiance. I had to sell that dream house. I had to sell the Audis in the garage. I had to sell the furniture in my house. I plummeted to a brand new low in my life. Like, if you thought I was at a low point in 08, that was like scratching the surface. Now I had hit the biggest lowest point, because now it wasn't just that I was losing material things. I'd actually kind of learned to shed material things off at this point, but now mentally I was in the rudder. I was blaming everybody else for why this happened. I was blaming other things, other circumstances. I was taking zero responsibility, because now I had that little ego. I'd been successful, so I had a taste of that. So now I lost it all. So I still had that ego keeping my mind wrong. And I went into this blame game. And this went on for a while, until I remember so much had happened, but I was living in one of my apartment buildings because I couldn't afford the house. And I got a postcard to go to a 3-day seminar to learn how to flip houses. Now, remember, I had been flipping houses, a couple of them. And I'm like, I don't want to go. But on the back of the postcard, it said, come to the seminar and we'll give you a free iPod shuffle. I was running a lot and I didn't have an iPod shuffle. I'm like, I need that. Nothing to lose. And I had an iPod shuffle to gain. So I went, and I'll save all the boring stuff, but I got there and I remember day 2, there was 2 guys that got up in front and talked. And I was excited to see these guys because they were on the postcard. One had an A&E TV show and the other guy was like the money guy. So I'm like listening to them, and I'm the only advisor in the room. And these guys are talking about money, but they were talking about money in a way that was completely foreign and completely opposite to me. Now, remember, this is 2014. I was, 10 years, 11 years as an advisor, seeing the high level. And these guys are talking about things I'd never, ever heard of. It was the opposite. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, what? I started questioning everything. And then I ended up signing up for the next part of that, swiping a credit card, coming home to Larissa, and she was pissed that I swiped my credit card and maxed it out. And I'm like, you have to go to this summit with me. We're going to meet these guys. This is the path. And here's the thing. From that point on, like, we can fast forward right up to today. What I learned is I learned what the wealthy did with money. I was an advisor. I knew everything about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, all that stuff. I thought I knew everything about life insurance too, because I'd been taught well. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden I'm in front of multimillionaires, and I've been surrounded by a couple billionaires. Never in my life had I seen a billionaire until I started following these guys around. Now all of a sudden, all the guys they surrounded with were multimillionaires, incredibly successful, operating multi-million-dollar companies. And I started asking them, as an advisor, we get good at asking people about money. We get good at talking about money. So I would just go around and ask these guys, so what do you do in this situation? How do you handle this? How are you getting money for that? And it was funny. Every single one of these guys was doing almost the exact same thing. And I'm like, this can't be. This can't be that all these guys do the same thing. And it's the opposite of everything I did as a financial advisor. At that moment, I went on the most intense journey in my life of seeking the truth and learning the secrets of the wealthy, and literally going back to, like, what did the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Walt Disneys and the Ray Krocs, what did all these mega successful people do that was different than what I was taught and everything that I was doing in my life? And I figured it out. I don't want to say I cracked the code, but they'd already cracked it. They'd cracked it hundreds of years ago. I just started having info coming available to me, because this wasn't stuff that anyone will ever learn from an advisor, because an advisor can't get paid off of it. So if you really ask people, so like, well, how come advisors don't teach this? Because they can't get paid. It's that simple, literally. Why didn't I teach it? Because I wouldn't get paid to do it. I knew what some of the stuff was, but we never were allowed to talk about it. They called it selling away. And that was it. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, this can't be this simple. Literally, all of these wealthy individuals, what they did isn't some elaborate thing. They didn't have big financial degrees. They changed one thing different than what I was doing. And that was where their money went first. And then the second thing that they changed is they always made their money go to work for them. They kept their money in continuous and constant motion. A lot of these multimillionaires, they had lots of cash flow, but their assets were always deployed. I remember asking a few of them if they'd lend me money on my deals. Their money was already out. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's a multimillionaire and he has no money to lend me on my $50,000 real estate deal. Good for him. I know this now, but I didn't know this then. I'm thinking something's wrong, and nothing was wrong. This guy was brilliant. He was keeping his money moving and mimicking exactly what a bank does every day with the money that we graciously deposit there. And the only one winning in that equation that we've been taught, whether it's 401ks or banks, is the bank and the financial institution, because we're not in control of our money anymore. We gave up control. And by giving up control, which is what we're taught to do, it's not our faults. It's just what we're taught to do our entire lives, is to give up control of our money and to work for money. Okay. Once we did that, the banks make the money, the 400 to 1300%, according to Bauer Financial. That's what they make more than we do on our deposits. 401ks, like, we give up control of our money to put them into these things for this false reality of retirement. And then we can't use that money for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Man, we have literally been taught to do things with money we would never, ever, ever do with things that money buys. You wouldn't buy your dream car and wait 5, 10, 15 years to take it for a test drive. Would you and your spouse buy your dream house, and then right when you're ready to walk in and get that, unlock the door to your dream house, you say, sweetie, hold on. We can't move in for 5, 10, or 15 years. Remember, we got to treat our money or our thing we bought the same way we treat our money. We got to just park it somewhere and leave it sit, and we can't enjoy it. It's backwards.
It's brilliant. So I've had many discussions about money and about what the wealthy do and stuff like that. So a couple quick questions for you. Mm-hmm. You're right. I agree with everything that you've said, and we have been trained to do that. And so we've also, the human brain has been trained to try to save money as much as you can, stash it away in a savings account, tuck it under your mattress so that if there's a rainy day, you'll be okay. And our brain is also so afraid of losing that money. We're more afraid of losing money than we would be to make money. And so that causes people to really stay in scarcity mindset and, and just broke most of the time, or just barely getting by. So how do you, are you suggesting maybe that Oh, and the other thing too is that when you put your money into like an IRA or a 401k or something like that, to pull it out, you get taxed, right? So there's more pain then, because now if you early withdraw, you're going to have another penalty, which means you're going to lose more money. So all that fear around money, it keeps us trapped in the game. So what do you do?
It's so simple. Listen, I've helped thousands and thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands, but directly as clients, thousands, over 3,000 people. And I've realized it every time. You mentioned it. What do? We have this fear mentality. Okay. So what do? We stash money in bank accounts, or we put money, in whatever account you put your money in, and that money sits there. But yet our life goes on. So when we have our money sitting there because of fear, that money's not working for us. It's not making hardly anything. I mean, your bank account isn't even keeping pace with inflation. And then we go out, we buy things, we buy cars, we buy boats, we buy houses, we rack up credit cards. Now let's just pick on credit cards real quick. I'm just going to give you an example of one way that people could build wealth without having to work any harder, without having to work any longer, without having to take on any more risk, and without having to give up control of their money. Now I'll have to get to where that one place that the wealthy changed, and put their money. But let me just explain this just with a savings account or a checking account. If you got a bunch of money in your checking account, and then all of a sudden you've got a Visa, and that Visa has, let's just say, a $5,000 balance, but you got 10 grand in your savings, you owe Visa 5 grand. Okay. You feel good because you got 10 grand in the bank. You don't feel so good that you got 5,000 with the credit card, but you're like, everybody's got credit card debt. And then you look at your statement and they're charging you 27.99%. And you graciously every month make the minimum payment of $100, and you just give them $100 every month. You're literally giving away 27.99% of money that you should be earning. And people are like, well, I am making that. I'm making it in the stocks. Forget it. Stop kidding yourself. That's FOMO in the euphoria. We'll cover that. But you're paying Visa 27.99. Now, here is what the wealthy would do. They wouldn't have their money in a bank account, but let's just pretend they did. They'd take the 5 grand from their bank. They'd pay off Visa. Most people would be like, okay, I'm done. I paid Visa off. I don't owe Visa money anymore. And they would stop the equation there. But the wealthy would go one additional level. The wealthy would say, I'm going to treat my money the same way that I treated the bank's money or Visa's money. That $100 a month that I used to give to Visa, I just took 5 grand from my savings and I paid off Visa. I'm going to take the 100 a month, and I'm just going to change the name on the check. And instead of the name on the check being Visa, it's going to be Chris Naugle's bank. And I'm going to have that money go back into, let's just pretend right now it's the savings account. What you just did is you just recaptured and recycled the equivalent of 27.99% interest. Now, how many of you would like to make 27.99% on your money in the stock market? Every one of you. But to do that, you'd take unnecessary risk. And right now, we're at one of the highest points in the market ever. So if the rules of engagement for making money in any investment is Warren Buffett's buy low, sell high, and you can't lose money. Those are his 3 rules: buy low, sell high, and don't lose money. What is everybody doing right now? This is 2020, okay, or 2021, the year after COVID. The market's crazy. What's everybody doing? Plowing money in the market. What are they doing? They're doing the opposite of what Warren says. They're buying high. And when the market crashes, and believe me, folks, I've seen this happen over and over. What will they do when the market crashes? Just like it did last year, they'll sell. So they bought high, they sold low, and they lost money instead of buying low, which takes patience and discipline, selling high, which takes a lot of discipline. It's why people should be selling right now, or at least some people, because that's high, and then not losing money. Like, it's such a simple strategy that everybody defies because of one thing: FOMO. The fear of missing out is just as powerful as fear itself, because it is a fear, but it's the fear of missing out on something. It's not the lack fear that we talked about. It's the fear of missing out. So what I just described is one of the best ways to build wealth. And it doesn't involve taking risk, giving up control, or going out there and working harder. It involves you taking back the money you're giving away to everybody else.
Let me jump in real quick and ask you a question then. Okay. Because I agree with that as well. If you're paying 27% interest on a credit card, making those monthly minimum payments is going to destroy you. You'll end up paying 3 times the price for what you originally paid. That's what happens with our mortgages. All right. We buy a house for, we'll just say a regular average person might buy a house for $350,000. They end up paying like $700,000 for that house by the time it's said and done. So I get the idea of paying off the credit cards and then setting up some automatic accounts. One of my favorite books is Automatic Millionaire. David Bach, because you just set it up so it happens automatically.
Automate.
So I love that. I love that advice. So what about the idea though? I had a friend of mine tell me, he says, we always want to pay off our credit card debt, but then we always have more credit card debt. So you need to get into the habit of paying yourself first, and put that money into your account so that you have it, and then eventually pay off your credit card debt. But at least you are paying yourself and you're accumulating wealth so that you have more wealth today than you did yesterday. And every day try to be a little bit wealthier, than you were the day before. So what's your view of that?
Yeah, no, there's 3 rules. Pay yourself first, pay yourself with interest, and recycle and recapture all the money you give away. That's the secret. That's like the money multiplier methodology. Mm-hmm. So let's go back just a second ago, because we already know that the bank's winning if you're keeping excessive money sitting in bank accounts. So the wealthy, I'll just take it back to the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, 2 of the wealthiest families. Back then, they didn't trust banks. Even though they were in banking, they did not trust banks. So they had to find a better place to store their capital. So they searched long and hard. And what they found is that banks weren't the place. Giant mutually owned insurance companies were. So they then, I want to ask any of you listening, like, can you walk into a giant insurance company and say, hey, I'm here, I got all this money, can I deposit it in your account? The insurance company would be like, what do I look like, a bank? No, get out. They don't do that. So these smart families said, you know what? We have to create a banking system using mutually owned insurance companies. And how they did it is with a boring product that we all know about but don't understand, called whole life insurance. That insurance was around back then, just like it is today. But they then had to say, well, we have to eliminate all the excess on these things, because if we just buy whole life, we're buying life insurance, which is great because we want legacy, but we want banking, which means we need access and control of our money immediately. So they had to redesign how they used whole life. So they designed and engineered whole life policies so that they worked just like your bank account. And they deemed it and called it privatized banking. Privatized banking has been around for hundreds of years. Look it up. And it's around today, but no one teaches you what privatized banking is. And when they do teach you, most people make the mistake of saying, oh yeah, it's a whole life. No, it's not. It's not the whole life you walked into your insurance store and bought off the shelf. That would never work the same way. This is a very specially designed and engineered whole life that works differently than a life insurance plan. So that one change I mentioned earlier, what these wealthy individuals did with their money, they changed just one thing, and that was where their money went first. But why? So we already now know that where they were putting their money first is a specially designed and engineered whole life, this private bank. But why would they do that? Well, because insurance companies are in the business of making guarantees. What is the first guarantee that a whole life gives people contractually? An interest rate on their money. And what is that interest rate as of 2021? 4%. Plus they're mutuals. They're not publicly traded companies. So they pay dividends every year. So right now, one of the worst interest rate cycles and a 30-year low, we're at 6% on some of these insurance companies. So we're making 4% plus a 2% dividend. So the wealthy know that 6% is better than 1 at the bank. So number one, we're doing that, but that doesn't solve the problem, because now when an opportunity comes, I need to have that money and I need to be able to deploy it quick, easy, without any restrictions. So the bank, if you had an opportunity, you went to your bank to take money out really quick, they make you fill forms out and all this stuff, but you can usually get that money and use it. An insurance company is the same way, if designed right. So these wealthy then would go in and they would put the money in. They would then take the money out when they needed it for the opportunity, but they wouldn't take a withdrawal. They would take a loan. Now that's a swear word for most people. When I say loan, they're like, oh God, another debt. I'm trying to get out of debt. No, but what if the loan from the insurance company never needed to be paid back? Now people are thinking, oh, that sounds too good to be true, but it's not. It's easy. The insurance company made 2 promises. 1, a 4% guarantee as of 2021. Number 2, they promised to pay a death benefit someday when you graduate. Nice way of saying die. Okay, so those are the 2 promises. The insurance company is glad to give you a portion of your death benefit while you're living in the form of a loan. And they don't care if you ever pay it back, because they'll just pay less when you die. So these loans are nothing more than an advance of your death benefit. Now, the insurance company does charge you interest. So let's get to the math. If you're making 6 with dividend and the insurance company is charging you 5, your arbitrage is 1. You're making 1% for using your money. But here's the most important reason why the wealthy use this, because all that stuff is just, it's icing on the cake. It goes back to what Albert Einstein talked about, compound interest. To earn compound interest, most people have been taught that they have to put their money somewhere and leave it sit. It's the only way to earn compound interest. You can't disrupt that money, otherwise you stop the flow of interest. But with insurance companies and this specially designed product I'm talking about, you can put the money in there, take the loan out, And when you take the loan, you're not actually taking your money. You're taking the insurance company's money from their general account. So your deposits that you put into this account are still in there, earning 4% plus the dividend each and every year while you're still holding the money. So now every year that money compounds and is worth more, is worth more, is worth more. Most people don't even understand compound interest. And that's why Albert Einstein said it's the eighth wonder of the world. He said, those that understand it, earn it. Those that don't, pay it. We've only been taught to pay it, not earn it. But now you know how to earn it and use it, because now you can earn uninterrupted compound interest on every dollar that you put through this specially designed whole life. And then you can still take that money and use it, buy real estate, invest in stocks when the market goes down, whatever things you're right now using the bank's money for. You need to change that, and you need to use your bank, which is this private bank I'm talking about, to buy those things. Back to the credit card. What if instead of using that savings account money, we use this private bank? And we took that, we made deposits into our private bank, then we took it out as a loan and we paid off Visa. And then we recaptured the $100, which is the 27.99% we were given to Visa, and we put that back in our account. We now just made money twice. Once on the arbitrage between what we're making and what we're paying the insurance company, and once on the recaptured money. How many times in your life can you do that? Your car payment? You want to get all the money back for every car you ever bought, driven, or that you will ever buy, drive, and own? Change one thing. Change where the money goes. The $500 monthly payment you're paying for your car, pay it back to your bank every month, just like you pay their bank, pay your bank. And very quickly, you'll see that you not only have the car in the driveway, but all the money back in your account to use for the next car, and over and over. Sorry, I went long on that, but I get so freaking passionate about this, because when I learned this, I immediately said, there's no way this works that way. I was an advisor. They didn't teach me this. I thought this defied everything. This was a lie. That's what I thought. And I remember saying that. And he said, well, if this is a scam, then how have I been using this and loaning you money? This is that Mike guy. And I said, good point. So he made me watch a 90-minute video from the guy that taught him. And that 90-minute video opened this whole universe that I'd never learned. And then I started applying it and using it. And today I have 7 of these banking policies. My wife has 3, my mom has 2, my daughter has 1. And I just continuously move money through this private banking for everything that I do, from private lending to cars to, I could just go on for days.
Wow. Chris, you have delivered. I've heard a lot of advice over the years that I have not heard that bit of advice. I mean, that is amazing. I can't wait to go through this recording again and just listen to it. So how do you approach setting up one of these whole life accounts?
Well, you find somebody first that knows how to do it. I mean, that's what we do as a company, but there's not many of us out there that are doing this, because the insurance companies pay us like complete crap to do this. So that's what you do. You got to find somebody that knows how to build it. And once we build a plan, you basically set up the parameters. I don't tell you how much to deposit. You tell me how much you want to deposit. Then we get it all applied to the insurance company. It takes about 30 to 45 days to get the thing approved. And then you just start making deposits. Now, what we've done as a company is we've created the back-end banking system. So everything I just said, for some people, their head's spinning. It's too many numbers, right? Oh, I got to track this. I got to track that. I don't have time for that. Well, we understand that. So we created the back office. Just like when you walk into your bank and you take a loan, the vice president that actually sells you the loan at the bank, their sales. Then your loan goes to the back office where they track all your payments, all your interest, and then they tell the bank how much money they're making. We created the back office for you. And I mentioned one thing there, when people hear this for the first time, when I did, they think that this is too good to be true. Well, traditional banks are the number one purchasers of these types of whole life policies. Just look it up, type in BOLI, B-O-L-I, bank owned life insurance, and you'll see JP Morgan, Bank of America, they own more whole life than they do all the land and buildings on their balance sheet. Why? Well, it's either because they're stupid or they know something we don't know. And then when you walk in and you see all the vice presidents in a bank, because I know every one of you, when you walk in a bank, you're like, vice president, vice president, vice president, vice president. Why do they need so many vice presidents? A bank's an entity, a corporation. They can't buy a life insurance policy. They need a body to insure. The bank can't just insure any rank and file employee. They need, you're laughing, they need an insurable interest to insure one of their employees. So who's an insurable interest to an entity? An executive. What is a vice president? An executive. Now, do you see why banks need so many vice presidents? Because they need a body to insure, to buy more BOLI so that they can move more money, earn more uninterrupted compound interest. Holy crap. The banks are doing this and have been forever. Why aren't we mimicking the banks?
Yeah. because nobody knows about this.
Correct.
I mean, except maybe the very wealthy.
And they know about it because they got advisors that are giving them prudent advice because they're not worried about commissions because they're already getting paid either retainers or performance bonuses, or maybe they're on salary. The problem is when I was an advisor, if I sold a regular off the shelf whole life, somebody put 10 grand into it, that was a good day. I made $5,500 to $7,500. That's really good commission, right? And this is what Dave Ramsey talks about. The only one winning is the agent, right? It's because they got big commissions. So let's reverse and let's talk about these private banking policies, specially designed whole lives. Somebody puts 10 grand in. How much do we make on that 10 grand? $497. Well, what's the difference between the agent that made $7,500 and me who makes $497? The money you have to use immediately. It's the biggest difference. This is what the Rockefellers figured out, the Rothschilds. This is what banks do. They don't have agents and advisors getting big commissions. They're giving them just a little bit and they're using the money themselves. You see, in life, this is the golden goose. And this is kind of where like the best advice I'm going to give you throughout this entire podcast is right here. The secret to success is you have to give. And if you give, you get. In this case, with privatized banking, I give a huge chunk, 60 to 90% of my commission to you, to the client who will help set this up so that they have access to their money. And what happens to me, I make a lot less. But you know what then happens? That person tells that person and that person. And then all of a sudden I've got a whole lot of people that want my help because I solved somebody's problem by giving. And that is the most important lesson I can give you in this. The secret to success is give more, give unconditionally, and everything will come back to you. And, you know, Will Rogers said it best. He said, the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. The biggest problem in America is what people think they know that it just ain't so. Be careful who you get your advice from. Be careful the people you surround yourself with, because in my life, it took a whole lot of failing, a whole lot of downtimes to get myself around people that actually knew what they were talking about, because I always surrounded myself with the people that made me feel comfortable. And those are the ones that kept me at the same level.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. So, Chris, for people who are excited like me, who want to figure out what the next step is and how to connect with you and how to get your books and how to take your classes and how to perhaps open up one of these privatized accounts, what's the best way to reach out to you?
It's easy. Just go to Chris Naugle. It's Naugle, chrisnaugle.com. And as soon as you do one index finger, there's a wealth webinar that I do every Wednesday. It's completely free. Join us. It's at 1:00 Eastern, or 2 swipes on your finger and you can get my book for free, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, all about what the wealthy do that we just talked about. And lastly, the most important part is that 90-minute video that I had to watch. That's on my website too. So watch the free 90-minute video and that will unlock the secrets of the wealthy. And then you can crack the code like I was able to.
Oh, that's amazing. So I have so many more questions for you, but I know with your time, we'll wrap it up. But this has just been absolutely mesmerizing. Wow. This was so much fun. I really appreciate all the amazing advice, all the incredible stories. This was really fun. So Chris, thank you so much for being an amazing guest today.
It was my honor and privilege. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was just awesome. So, all right, everybody, holy cow, Chris delivered. So chrisnaugle.com, we'll have all the links in the show notes. Make sure you check out the webinars and his stuff because Chris is legit. So go check it out. Apply what you've learned today. This is a turning point for you. Remember, we talked about you get the idea and then you got to put it into action. Chris just gave you some very powerful advice on how to become wealthier, using the money that you already have. So apply what you've learned, make your life mesmerizing, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody. Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief or high stress or procrastination or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to powermindsetprogram.com. That's powermindsetprogram.com and grab your copy today.